The White House Situation Room was unusually silent that evening. Usually, the room carried a constant rhythm of movement, advisors whispering, phones ringing, officers stepping in and out with updates from across the world. But tonight, the silence felt heavy, almost unnatural, as if everyone inside already understood that the next few hours could shape the future of the Middle East. Large digital screens covered the walls, displaying satellite images of the Persian Gulf, military positions, shipping routes, and intelligence feeds from American bases overseas. Tiny blinking symbols moved slowly across the maps like pieces in a dangerous game. Red markers identified Iranian naval patrols near the Strait of Hormuz. Blue icons represented American destroyers and carrier groups stationed nearby. Every movement was being tracked. President Donald Trump stood near the center table, staring at one of the screens with narrowed eyes. A thick folder containing Iran's official response to the American peace proposal rested unopened beside him. He had already read the summary twice, and each time it only made him angrier. The proposal from Washington had been intended to stop the rising tension that had pushed the region dangerously close to war. American negotiators, working through international mediators in Qatar and Switzerland, had offered limited sanctions relief and a temporary reduction of military activity if Tehran agreed to strict conditions regarding missile development and regional militia support. But Iran's response had arrived only hours earlier, and it was far from what the White House expected. Tehran demanded immediate removal of major economic sanctions, financial compensation for previous military damage, and guarantees that the United States would reduce its military presence in the Gulf. Iranian leaders also refused to limit certain missile programs unless regional rivals agreed to similar restrictions. To Trump, it sounded less like negotiation and more like defiance. "That's not peace," he said sharply, breaking the silence. "That's a list of demands." No one replied immediately. Secretary of State Eleanor Hayes adjusted her glasses and carefully opened another folder filled with diplomatic notes. "European allies are asking us to keep the talks alive," she said cautiously. "France and Germany believe Tehran may still compromise if both sides continue negotiations." Trump gave a cold smile. "They've been saying that for years." At the far end of the room, Secretary of Defense Mark Reynolds stood beside a digital map showing military activity in the Gulf. His expression remained calm, but the tension in his voice was impossible to hide. "Our surveillance confirms increased Iranian naval patrols near commercial shipping lanes," he explained. "No direct attacks, but they're sending a message." "How many ships?" Trump asked. 7 patrol craft, 2 support vessels, and increased drone activity. A military officer beside Reynolds tapped on a tablet, bringing new images onto the main screen. Grainy infrared footage showed fast-moving boats cutting through dark waters near an oil tanker earlier that morning. The room became even quieter. Everyone remembered what had happened years earlier when attacks on oil tankers had pushed the region to the edge of open conflict. Even rumors of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz could shake global markets within hours. An economic advisor sitting near the back of the room cleared his throat nervously. "Oil prices are already climbing," he said. Asian markets reacted immediately after reports leaked about Tehran's response. "How bad?" Trump asked without turning around. 7% overnight. "If shipping traffic slows further, we could see global energy panic by next week." Trump exhaled slowly and walked toward the long table. Outside the reinforced walls of the Situation Room, rain tapped softly against the White House windows, but inside, the atmosphere felt far colder. Across the ocean, Tehran was facing its own crisis. Inside a heavily guarded government compound, Iranian officials gathered beneath bright fluorescent lights and portraits of military martyrs. President Masoud Pezeshkian sat quietly at the head of the table while Revolutionary Guard commanders argued over America's growing military presence. One commander slammed his hand against the table. "The Americans are using diplomacy as cover while surrounding us with warships," he warned. "If we appear weak now, they will pressure us forever." Another official disagreed. "The economy cannot survive another full conflict," he said carefully. "People are already suffering from sanctions." The room erupted into overlapping arguments. Outside the building, ordinary citizens followed every development through television broadcasts and social media updates. Cafes filled with anxious conversations. Store owners worried about rising prices. Parents hurried children home before dark as rumors spread that American airstrikes might begin within days. In northern Tehran, a taxi driver listened to a radio discussion while waiting at a traffic light. Analysts debated whether the peace proposal had officially collapsed. One expert warned that even a small military mistake could trigger regional war involving multiple countries. The driver glanced at his young daughter asleep in the back seat and quietly lowered the volume. Back in Washington, another intelligence officer entered the situation room carrying fresh reports. "Sir," he said, handing papers to Reynolds, "we've detected cyber activity targeting Gulf shipping networks." Reynolds scanned the report quickly. Source? Possibly Iranian-linked groups. Still under investigation. Trump looked up immediately. Any damage? Not yet. The president leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. Around him, advisors waited in tense silence. Everyone knew that modern conflict no longer began with tanks crossing borders. It could begin with hacked systems, drones, blocked shipping routes, or anonymous attacks nobody could immediately prove. One wrong decision could spiral out of control within hours. "Have we heard from Israel?" Trump finally asked. Hayes nodded. Their government is extremely concerned. They believe Iran may increase support for allied militias across the region if talks fail. And Saudi Arabia? They're requesting additional defensive support. Trump stood again and walked toward the large digital map glowing on the wall. The Persian Gulf looked small from this distance, but everyone in the room understood its importance. Nearly a third of the world's oil moved through those waters. If conflict erupted there, the economic consequences would spread far beyond the Middle East. Millions of ordinary people around the world, families filling gas tanks, workers commuting to jobs, businesses depending on stable markets, would feel the impact immediately. The president folded his arms tightly. "They think pressure will force us into concessions," he said quietly. "But weakness invites more aggression." Hayes spoke carefully. "If we reject further negotiations completely, Tehran may retaliate politically or militarily." Trump turned toward her. "And if we accept those demands, every hostile government watching learns the same lesson." Nobody answered. The tension in the room deepened as another screen displayed breaking news headlines from international networks. Television anchors spoke rapidly about the collapsing peace proposal, military buildups, and fears of another regional war. Outside the White House gates, reporters stood in the rain broadcasting live updates while crowds gathered behind security barriers. Questions spread faster than answers. Would sanctions increase? Would the U.S. launch military strikes? Would Iran retaliate? Inside the situation room, Trump finally returned to the table and placed both hands firmly against its surface. "Prepare the next sanctions package," he ordered. "Expand naval presence in the Gulf. I want another carrier group moved closer immediately." Several advisors exchanged uneasy looks. Reynolds nodded slowly. "Understood." "And inform our allies that America remains ready for peace," Trump continued, "but we will not negotiate under threats." The order moved through the room quickly. Officers began making calls. Screens updated with deployment routes and operational timelines. The machinery of global power was already moving. Yet beneath the strategy, beneath the politics and military planning, there was another reality nobody openly discussed. Fear. Fear that diplomacy was slipping away. Fear that both nations were becoming trapped by pride, pressure, and public expectations. Fear that somewhere in the crowded waters of the Gulf, one pilot, one drone operator, or one nervous soldier could make a mistake that would ignite something impossible to control. As midnight approached in Washington, rain continued falling over the White House.